Beneath the dimming glow of medieval lanterns walked women whose stories were rarely written, yet quietly shaped the rhythm of their cities. Courtesans, judged in daylight, sought in shadows, living lives balanced between intimacy, power, and peril. Today on HistQuest, we open the heavy wooden doors of the past to uncover a hidden world of longing, influence, danger, and remarkable resilience. A world where secrets held value and every moment of freedom carried its own cost. If you enjoy the forgotten corners of history, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to HistQuest, your guide to the unseen past. Act 1. The City of Silent Footsteps. At dawn, when the medieval city first begins to stir, the cobblestones are cold to the touch, still holding the memory of the night. Smoke rises lazily from chimneys. Bakeries open their shutters, and merchants prepare their stalls. But there is another world hidden behind the wooden beams and quiet alleys, a world that awakens just as the rest of the town falls asleep, a world where secrets are currency, where desires breathe in the shadows, and where the notion of love for money shapes destinies. This is the world of medieval courtesans. Their story does not begin with glamour. It begins with survival. In the cramped lower quarters of the city, the so-called Shadow District, girls and women live lives that are rarely written in chronicles. Most are born into poverty. Some lose their families to plague or war. Others flee rural villages seeking bread and shelter. And few paths are open to them. The guilds belong to men. The monasteries no longer accept the untrained. Domestic service requires recommendations they do not have. So the city swallows them, and they learn quickly. If they are to survive, they must sell something the world is eager to buy. Some offer their labor, others their strength, and some, by choice or coercion, offer what society pretends not to want, yet constantly pays for. They offer affection, comfort, and intimacy. They offer love for money. The Shadow District is not a single street, but a tangle of narrow passages. Laundry lines stretch above like tangled spider webs, dripping cold water. The sounds here differ from the marketplace's clatter. Soft laughter from behind shutters, whispered negotiations, footsteps that do not echo. At night, red lamps burn faintly, guiding those who seek company without being seen. In this district live women who have learned to navigate danger as easily as others navigate a map. They know which guards accept bribes, which taverns hold violent men, which alleyways lead back to the main road, and which lead to trouble. Every one of them learns to walk with purpose, even when fear sits behind her ribs like a shard of ice. Among them is a young woman named Lysandra. Her name is spoken softly, like a rumor. In her 20s, with a quiet elegance that doesn't quite match the grime-covered street, she seems almost misplaced in this harsh world. Still, she walks confidently in her wool dress, patched but clean, her dark hair braided in a neat coil. She carries herself not as a criminal or an outcast, but as someone who has accepted a role in life and learned to survive by playing it well. Lysandra was not always a courtesan. Once, she was the daughter of a traveling merchant, trained to read ledgers and negotiate prices. But misfortune, the kind that sweeps across families like a sudden storm, took everything from her. When her father died on the road during a harsh winter, she was left with no inheritance and no protection. The guilds rejected her. The church sent her away. And so she entered the Shadow District, guided by hunger and the knowledge that respectable society had no place for a woman alone. Her first night as a courtesan is carved into her memory, a mixture of terror and numbness, like stepping into freezing water. The older women taught her how to survive, how to recognize dangerous clients, how to fake confidence, how to laugh at men's jokes even when her heart felt like embers. They taught her that love for money is not simply a transaction, but a shield, an armor made of gold coins and forced smiles. But Lysandra learned something else as well. She had a gift, not the crude type that men expected, but a gift for observing, listening, and becoming exactly what her clients needed her to be. A grieving widower, she offered comfort. A knight tormented by guilt, she became confession. A merchant craving admiration, she became praise. In a world where men held every public power, courtesans learned to wield a private kind, one invisible yet influential. By the time Act 1 of our story begins, Lysandra has built a fragile existence out of whispered secrets and carefully shaped emotions. She is not rich, but she is not starving either. She does not consider herself fortunate, but neither does she pity herself. She simply moves through life like a figure made of dusk and candlelight, neither fully seen nor ever forgotten. Yet something stirs beneath the surface of the city. War has begun brewing across the borders. Taxes rise, tensions simmer, and rumors spread that the bishop intends to cleanse the Shadow District in the name of moral purity. For the women who live there, this means danger. For Lysandra, it means change. One evening, as she stands at her window, watching the lanterns flicker in the street below, she hears a knock at her door. The visitor is a stranger, a man cloaked in dark velvet, wearing a ring engraved with a crest she does not recognize. His voice is low, measured, and entirely too polished for the district. "I wish to speak with you," he says, stepping inside before she can refuse. "Not as a client, not tonight." Lysandra studies him carefully. His clothes are worn but expensive. His boots are muddy from travel, and his eyes, gray, sharp, seem to search her like a scholar reading a manuscript. He introduces himself only as Rowan. "I've been told," he begins, "that the women of this district hear more truths than priests, more confessions than monks." Lysandra raises a brow. "We are not in the habit of giving away the truths we hear." "And yet," Rowan says, "I believe you may want to hear mine." He sits uninvited. She remains standing. "There is a plot forming," he continues, "one that affects not only this city, but women like you, women who have long been dismissed, controlled, or silenced. I seek someone who understands the world from the ground, not from the gilded balconies of the elite." Lysandra almost laughs. "And you think a courtesan's life makes her an expert in politics?" "I think," Rowan replies quietly, "that a courtesan understands power better than most kings." She says nothing, but something in her posture changes, just slightly, enough for him to notice. He leans forward. "If the bishop carries out his purge, you and everyone you know will be at risk. They will take away your homes, your livelihoods, perhaps even your lives. Unless someone stops him." "And you want me to be part of this stopping?" "Not with swords," Rowan says. "With knowledge, with insight, with understanding of human nature. The kind only a woman who has lived through love for money can truly possess." For the first time, Lysandra feels a flicker of something unfamiliar, the possibility that her life, her struggles, her survival has value beyond the district's borders. She folds her arms. "I'll listen, for now." Rowan smiles faintly. Then our story begins. Act Ethni. Lessons written in candlelight. The next morning arrives slowly in the Shadow District, as if reluctant to disturb what the night has left behind. A thin fog lies close to the cobblestones, and the cold air tastes faintly of smoke and damp wood. Lysandra sits near her window, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of watered wine, trying to decide whether what happened last night was a mistake or the beginning of something she can no longer ignore. Rowan's words still echo inside her mind. A purge, a cleansing, a threat to their very existence. Women like her have always lived in uncertainty, but never had the danger felt so deliberate, so coordinated. And the most unsettling part is this: Rowan spoke with too much clarity to be lying, too much conviction to be pretending. But who is he? A noble? A spy? A fugitive? She has spent years reading men's faces, yet his remains a closed book, and that bothers her more than she expected. A soft knock breaks her thoughts. It's Myrelle, one of the older women who shares the building. Wrinkles gather at the corners of her eyes, but her spirit is sharp, and her tongue sharper. She leans on a cane that she doesn't fully need, using it mostly to strike floors when she disapproves of something. "You didn't sleep," Myrelle observes without greeting. Lysandra smirks. "And you watch too closely." "Someone must. This district eats the unwary." Myrelle steps inside, closing the door with her cane. "Word spreads you had a visitor." "Fast work," Lysandra mutters. "This one wasn't a client, was he?" The older woman peers intently. "Not with that cloak, or the boots, or the jaw made of secrets." Lysandra sighs. "No, he wasn't a client." Myrelle hums, thoughtful. "Be wary of men who come for reasons other than love for money. They are always more dangerous." But what she doesn't realize is that the danger has already found them. Later that day, Rowan returns, not at night, not shrouded in shadows, but in broad daylight. This surprises her. Men of status never walk openly through the Shadow District during the day, unless they enjoy scandal or intend to make arrests. His appearance brings curious eyes from windows and doorways. He knocks only once before she lets him in. "I wasn't certain you'd come back," Lysandra says. "You listened yesterday. I took it as encouragement rather than dismissal." She studies him closely. Today he looks more worn, as if sleep escaped him too. Lysandra sits, gesturing for him to speak. Rowan wastes no time. The bishop has gathered support from several guildmasters. They plan to present a petition to the city council in a fortnight to shut down this district permanently. Her pulse tightens. Shut down? How? Evictions? Arrests? Both. And worse. Rowan's jaw hardens. They believe purging vice will purify the city. They claim that women who sell love for money corrupt society. But I suspect the real reason is simpler: control. Control of what? She demands. Of influence, Rowan answers. Of secrets. Of information that flows through these streets more freely than in any noble court. She cannot deny this. Courtesans, by their nature, learn the truths that powerful men whisper between wine and temptation. If the bishop fears leaks, silencing the women who know them is convenient. "And you," Lysandra asks, "what stake do you have in this?" Rowan hesitates. The pause is brief, but revealing. "My sister," he says quietly. Lysandra's eyes soften, though she masks it. "Used to?" "She escaped the district years ago, with the help of a kind woman. I owe this place a debt, and I refuse to stand by while others suffer." "How noble," she says, though not mockingly. He shakes his head. "Not noble, personal." Silence stretches between them, tense and fragile. Finally, Lysandra speaks. "What do you need from me?" "Your knowledge," Rowan replies. "The bishop's supporters visit here. You hear their habits, their faults, their loyalties. You know who can be swayed, who can be embarrassed, who fears scandal. We must use what you know to break the bishop's alliance." Lysandra leans back, considering. You want me to gather information. I want you to survive, Rowan corrects her, and to help others survive. For a moment, Lysandra sees not a stranger, but a man who genuinely understands how precarious her world is. But cooperating with him means stepping beyond the boundaries that have kept her alive for years. It means taking risks she has avoided, betraying clients who trust her, even if they trust her only because they think women like her are powerless. Rowan must know what she's thinking, because he adds, "You will not be alone. I have allies." Allies? Lysandra lifts an eyebrow. Who? A few merchants, a scribe in the council hall, a guard who owes me his life. He pauses. A network of quiet hands. She gives a faint smile. Sounds like trouble. It is, he replies, but trouble worth facing. That evening, Lysandra walks through the streets of the Shadow District with new eyes. Every familiar sound, the creak of shutters, the whispers behind curtains, the boots of guards patrolling lazily, feels sharper, edged with warning. She heads to her usual workplace, a modest brothel called the Lantern House. Inside, the air is warm, filled with candlelight and the soft, familiar murmur of women preparing for the night. The Madam Adela stands near a large mirror, adjusting her silk shawl. A tall woman in her 50s, she has the posture of a queen forced to rule over a small, crooked kingdom. Her gaze lands on Lysandra immediately. "You look troubled," Adela says. "Did some man demand more than he paid for?" "Nothing like that." Lysandra hesitates. "Do you have a moment?" "For you, always." They retreat to Adela's back room. The walls are lined with ledgers, perfumes, ribbons, and delicate fabrics. Tools of a trade that society condemns, but depends on. Lysandra recounts Rowan's plan. She avoids giving his name, but Adela reads enough between the lines. "You want my blessing to help him," Adela says finally. "Yes," Lysandra answers. "It's dangerous, I know." "Men like him always bring danger," Adela warns. "They speak of protecting us, but they leave when the real fire begins." Lysandra lowers her gaze. "He seems different." Adela sighs deeply. "They all seem different until they don't." She walks to a shelf, pulls out a small iron key, and presses it into Lysandra's hand. This opens the old lockbox under the stairs. If you are going to play with fire, do it with something to protect yourself. What's inside? "Information," Adela says. "Letters, names, promises written by men who paid for more than love, for money. If the bishop wants war, he'll learn what it is to fight women who know too much." Lysandra breathes out slowly. "You're supporting me?" "I am," Adela nods. "Because if the bishop wins, none of us will survive. And because I trust your instincts." The madam squeezes Lysandra's hand once, firm, motherly, full of unspoken fear. "Be careful," she whispers. "You walk a razor's edge now." That night, once the clients have come and gone, Lysandra retrieves the iron key and opens the hidden lockbox. Inside lie dozens of letters sealed with crests, merchants, guildmasters, soldiers, confessions, arrangements, secrets paid for in gold. She sorts through the stack with growing dread. These letters could destroy reputations, ruin marriages, expose corruption, even spark violence. Power, she realizes, is not held by knights or kings. It is held by those who know the truth. And for the first time, Lysandra understands fully why Rowan sought her out. She knows this world. She knows its heartbeat, its shadows, its language of whispered bargains. She knows what men fear most. And she knows that if she does nothing, the Shadow District will burn. So, she gathers the letters, wraps them carefully, and places them into a cloth pouch. Tomorrow, she will meet Rowan again. Tomorrow, she will choose a side. For now, she sits alone in the dim room, surrounded by secrets and candlelight, and whispers to herself, "This is no longer just love for money. This is survival." Act 3. The Weight of Other People's Sins. The next day dawns with a restless wind, carrying fragments of conversation from the upper city, complaints about taxes, whispers about border skirmishes, warnings about strange travelers. But beneath all of that runs a deeper, quieter fear. Fear of change, fear of unrest, fear of moral crusades wrapped in scripture and authority. Lysandra walks through the city wrapped in a dark cloak, the pouch of letters hidden beneath her clothing. Every step feels heavier than usual. She has never feared the guards before. They seldom bother with women like her unless bribed or ordered. But today, with powerful names concealed in her garments, even the most indifferent patrol feels like a threat. She meets Rowan in a small stone chapel near the river, long abandoned except for a few old monks who come to pray before dawn. Its walls smell of incense and damp ash. The stained glass windows are cracked, their colors faded, yet the light that filters through still paints the room with soft blues and bruised purples. Rowan is already waiting. "You came," he says quietly. "I said I would. And you brought something?" Lysandra hands him the cloth pouch. He opens it, sees the letters, and breathes out sharply. This is enough to topple half the bishop's alliance. Enough to start a war, too, she mutters. Yes, Rowan agrees, if used carefully. But as he examines the seals, his expression shifts from shock to determination. These are exactly what we need. Proof of hypocrisy. Bargains made in shadows. Promises exchanged for flesh, comfort and love for money. Lysandra steps closer. What do we do now? We study them, Rowan says. We choose targets carefully. We persuade some and discourage others. Discourage, she repeats, raising a brow. Rowan gives a faint smile. Fear is a language the powerful understand very well. They work together in the chapel, reading the letters one by one, speaking in low voices, interrupting each other with questions and suspicions. Lysandra is surprised by how quickly they fall into rhythm. Her knowledge of the men, his ability to map out political connections. One letter implicates a guildmaster who funds the bishop's sermons. Another reveals a merchant who secretly pays for nights in the lantern house, despite preaching chastity in public. Another contains the confession of a knight seeking absolution for deeds far more sinful than visiting a courtesan. Lysandra's hands tremble as she reads some of the words. She has heard these confessions whispered in her bedchamber, but seeing them inked in the client's own handwriting makes them feel heavier, more permanent. Rowan notices. "Are you all right?" he asks gently. "It's strange," she says. "We hear these things every night, but holding them, seeing the truth written so plainly, it feels like holding a burning coal." "Because now it has weight," Rowan says. "Now it is power." She nods, but she also knows something else. Power cuts deeper when held by someone who has always been denied it. At last, Rowan sets aside the letters. "There is one man we must speak with first." "Who?" "Guildmaster Harvin. He controls the leather workers, the saddlers, and the furriers. He funds the bishop's campaigns more than anyone else." Lysandra frowns. "I know him. He visited several times last winter. He likes to boast more than he likes to pay." Rowan snorts. "Typical." "He's also cruel," she adds. "The kind of man who enjoys seeing women afraid." "Then we must give him a reason to fear something else." Their plan requires precision. They cannot accuse Harvin publicly. Not yet. Instead, they will confront him privately, showing him the incriminating letter he wrote during a drunken visit to the Shadow district. It contains enough scandal to ruin him, a confession of exploiting workers, bribing officials, and seeking absolution from a courtesan rather than a priest. Rowan and Lysandra wait for him outside his workshop, a large stone building that smells of tanned hides and heated oil. Workers move in and out, carrying bundles of fur and leather, glancing nervously at their master's door. When Harvin finally emerges, wrapped in his heavy fur cloak, his eyes widen at the sight of Rowan. "You," he growls, "I've told you not to come here." "And yet here I am," Rowan replies calmly. Harvin's gaze shifts to Lysandra. He sneers. "Brought one of your whores to blackmail me now?" Lysandra doesn't flinch. She has been called worse by better men. Rowan steps forward. "We're here to offer you an opportunity, not a threat." "Opportunity?" Harvin scoffs. Lysandra pulls out the letter, unfolding it slowly. Harvin blanches. His face drains of color, his hands clenching into fists. "You wouldn't dare." "Oh, I would," Rowan says. "But first, I want you to consider something. The bishop plans to cleanse the Shadow district. If he succeeds, what do you think will happen to the secrets you've spilled there? To the women who know them?" Harvin swallows. Rowan continues. "We intend to stop him, and you are going to withdraw your support." Harvin spits on the ground. All this because you want to save a handful of women who sell love for money? Yes, Rowan says simply. And because saving them means stopping corruption as well. Lysandra watches Harvin carefully. Fear is overtaking his anger now, turning his bravado into sagging desperation. I don't want trouble, Harvin mutters. Then withdraw, Rowan replies, quietly, and stay away from the bishop's council meetings. Do that, and this letter never sees daylight. Harvin hesitates only a moment more before nodding. Fine, I'll step back. Lysandra folds the letter. Good, because for once your fear may save lives, not destroy them. They turn and leave without another word. After the confrontation, Rowan and Lysandra cross the river into the quieter parts of the city. Evening is settling in, turning the sky dusty orange. Birds gather on rooftops, preparing for night. The world looks almost peaceful, but Lysandra knows better. Rowan walks beside her in thoughtful silence. You handled yourself well, he finally says. I've handled far worse men than Harvin, she replies. Still, you were remarkable. She looks away, not trusting herself to respond. Compliments with sincerity feel strange. She is used to receiving praise wrapped inside an exchange of love for money, not genuine respect. So, she says, changing the subject, why do they call you Rowan? That cannot be your real name. It is not, he admits with a small laugh. My real name would draw too much attention. Are you hiding from the bishop? Not only him, Rowan says. His tone darkens, but he doesn't elaborate. As they walk, Lysandra studies him quietly. A man who knows the city's secrets, who moves through noble halls while looking like he belongs in the shadows, who fights for women society despises, but also a man who is clearly haunted. How did your sister escape the district? She finally asks. Rowan's jaw tightens. A woman helped her, a courtesan. She gave her coin, shelter, protection. But the bishop discovered it and ordered her punished. What happened? She disappeared. Lysandra stops walking. Disappeared, she repeats softly. You think he killed her? Rowan nods once. Or imprisoned her, or worse. Lysandra feels a cold anger curl inside her chest. She has known cruelty, but the bishop's crusade reeks of something more, hatred disguised as righteousness. We won't let him do this again, she says. No, Rowan agrees. We won't. That night, Lysandra returns to the lantern house with a new sense of purpose. The other women gather around her when she enters, Morel, Adela, the younger girls just beginning their work. They look at her not with suspicion, but with hope. Well, Morel asks, did you learn anything useful? Lysandra nods. Harvin has agreed to withdraw support. Morel whistles. That's one hell of a start. Adela steps forward, her eyes soft. You've done something brave today. Lysandra looks around at all of them. Women who laugh for coins, cry in silence, survive in a world that hates them, yet cannot function without them. And she realizes that for the first time, they are not just surviving, they are fighting. But in the bishop's mansion across the city, a messenger kneels before the bishop himself, a tall, gaunt figure clothed in severe black. "Your Grace," the messenger says, trembling, "Guildmaster Harvin has withdrawn his support." The bishop's fingers tighten around the arm of his chair. "Withdrawn?" he repeats, voice dripping with restrained fury. "Why?" We do not know." The bishop rises slowly, like a storm gathering strength. "Someone is meddling," he whispers. "Someone thinks they can protect that district." His cold eyes narrow. "Find out who." And with that command, the purge begins to move faster. Act Avin. The Fall and the Fury. When love for money turns into a weapon and the city trembles. The trouble began quietly, as trouble often does in medieval cities, with whispers before sunrise. Adele awoke to the sound of hurried footsteps in the hallway of her rented chambers. When she opened her door, she found the innkeeper's wife crossing herself repeatedly. "They're arresting women," she said breathlessly. "Saint Aurelia's watch. They say the bishop ordered it. A cleansing." Adele felt her stomach tighten. She knew who the women meant. The city turns against its courtesans. By mid-morning, the streets echoed with chaos. Church banners waved above crowds as priests shouted about sin, corruption, and divine punishment. The bishop claimed the city's misfortunes, illness, crop failures, political disputes, were born of women who sell love for money and lead men into ruin. The irony burned. Men had created the demand, yet women would suffer the punishment. Marceline's house, once a sanctuary, was raided before noon. Its red lanterns, symbols of warmth and hospitality, were torn down and burned in the street. Girls fled across rooftops. Others hid in wine cellars or beneath bakeries. A few were caught and dragged by the hair into the public square, while people jeered, some out of cruelty, others out of fear. Adele shoved through the crowds, heart hammering, searching for familiar faces. She found Yasande cornered by soldiers, her dress torn, her eyes blazing, not with fear, but with anger. "You would arrest me," she spat at the sergeant, "but what of the men who sought my company? Will you chain them too?" The sergeant struck her. The crowd roared with approval. Adele pushed forward instinctively, shouting for them to stop. For a moment, she thought she would be beaten as well, but a cloaked figure intervened, pulling her out of the mob and into an alleyway. It was Marceline. "Come," she said, "there's no safety here." The council's dark bargain. That evening, in a candle-lit cellar beneath a spice merchant's shop, Adele sat with Marceline and 15 courtesans, frightened, trembling, furious. Marceline explained what she had learned. The bishop wanted to consolidate power, and the city council needed a scapegoat to pacify the fearful population. Courtesans, with their ambiguous status and economic independence, were the easiest target. Love for money, once a thriving economy of survival, had become an accusation, a sin, a crime. Some of the younger women sobbed. Others begged Marceline to leave the city. A few were ready to fight. Adele listened, torn between the duty of a historian and the fierce loyalty she now felt. "Tell them what you told me," Marceline urged her. So Adele did. She stood before them and spoke with a voice she hardly recognized, filled with conviction. You are not the cause of the city's suffering. You are its reflection, its desires, its hidden truths. And they fear you, not because you sin, but because you see. Silence filled the cellar, and in that silence something shifted. The women were no longer victims. They were a collective. The riot in the stone quarter. The next day, the bishop moved to seize Marceline herself. But when the guards arrived, they faced something they did not expect. A crowd of townspeople defending the courtesans. Bakers, seamstresses, old widows, even a few merchants who dared risk their status. They were people who had been helped by the women, through charity, through kindness, through whispered warnings about dangerous men or corrupt officials. The courtesans' quiet good deeds had built invisible alliances. The guards tried to push through. Someone threw a stone. Someone else shouted. The street erupted. A riot surged through the stone quarter. Torches were thrown. Barricades formed. Adele, swept into the chaos, saw Yasande break free from custody, her face bruised, but her spirit unbroken. She ran toward Adele, shouting, "They wanted war! Now they'll see how women fight when they have nothing left to lose." Truth as a blade. In the following hours, the city fractured. Some demanded justice for the women, others demanded their punishment. The bishop, furious and desperate, issued proclamations from the cathedral steps. But the one who delivered the decisive blow was not a warrior, it was Adele. She had spent weeks gathering stories, testimonies, records of patronage, and even letters from noblemen to their favorite companions. She compiled it all, every hypocrisy, every hidden truth, into a document she called the Ledger of Desire. Using the city's printing press, a recent invention, she produced dozens of copies overnight. At dawn, the streets were covered with them. The bishop's secrets, the council's affairs, the noblemen who paid for love while condemning it in public. All of it laid bare. By midday, the city erupted again, not against the courtesans, but against the rulers who had weaponized morality to hide their own corruption. A turning of the tide. The bishop lost his influence. The council was forced to withdraw its decrees. The raids ceased. But the cost was high. Several courtesans were injured, others lost their homes, some disappeared forever. When Adele visited Marceline after the dust settled, the older woman stood by her window, watching the sunrise. "You changed everything," she said. "No," Adele replied. "They changed everything. I only wrote the truth." Marceline nodded, though sadness lingered in her eyes. "Truth is a dangerous companion," she whispered. "But so is love for money, when the world decides it must be feared." Act A. The Price of Freedom. Where love for money becomes a mirror of the human soul. The city had calmed, but peace after chaos is a fragile thing. The air still smelled faintly of smoke. The stones still bore the scars of barricades and torches. Courtesans returned to the streets slowly, cautiously, wearing darker dresses and keeping their heads lowered, unsure if the world had truly changed, or if it simply waited to punish them again. Adele walked through the alleys that morning with a heaviness in her chest. She had helped expose corruption. She had stood beside the courtesans in their darkest hour. But now she realized that victory in the public eye rarely translated into real safety for those on society's margins. A city searching for its conscience. For weeks, debates raged in taverns and guild halls. The bishop's downfall had ignited questions no one dared ask before. If men freely paid for love, why were only women condemned for selling it? If desire was universal, why was shame assigned to only one side? If love for money existed everywhere, why pretend it was rare or monstrous? Philosophers, preachers, and merchants argued endlessly. But the courtesans themselves said little. They simply rebuilt, quietly, resiliently, as they always had. Some chose to retire. Some fled the city. Some returned to work, but on stricter, safer terms. And some, like Yasand, refused to disappear. "We earned our place in this city," she said one night, sharpening her quill as if it were a blade. "We will not vanish simply because men fear the truths we hold." Adele wrestles with her own past. As the courtesans rebuilt their world, Adele found herself confronting shadows she had long avoided. For in telling their stories, she had realized something uncomfortable. She had her own reasons for being drawn to them, reasons she had buried beneath scholarship and ambition. Growing up in a strict, noble household, Adele had witnessed countless hypocrisies: unfaithful fathers, abusive husbands, priests who preached purity while visiting brothels at night. She had watched noble women suffer silently, trapped in marriages arranged for politics rather than affection. The courtesans, by contrast, lived outside these chains. They sold love for money, yes, but in doing so, many had more autonomy than the noble women Adele had grown up among. They chose their clients. They chose their rooms. They chose their hours. Their lives were dangerous, yes, but often more honest. Adele envied that honesty. Her research had begun as observation, but now it had become confession. A mirror. A reckoning. The courtesans demand protection. With the city's political climate shifting, a group of courtesans gathered in Marceline's restored parlor, not to lament, not to hide, but to strategize. They wanted legal protection. They wanted limits on church interference. They wanted safety from violent clients. They wanted the right to exist without fear. Adele sat with them, recording every word. "We do not ask them to praise us," Marceline said, "only to recognize that we are part of this city, its economy, its culture, its heartbeat." Yasand added, "If love for money is a crime, then half the city should stand beside us in the stocks. But they do not, because we are easier to blame." Their argument was irrefutable. Adele offered to help them draft a petition, an unprecedented document demanding rights for women in their profession. Some argued it was too bold. Others feared retaliation. But the younger courtesans, those who had tasted violence firsthand, insisted it was necessary. The petition of the veiled. By spring, the petition was ready. Adele wrote the final version herself, weaving the women's voices into elegant yet unflinching prose. We sell what men seek. We offer what they cannot find elsewhere. And for this, we are punished, hunted, erased. We demand recognition, autonomy, and protection from harm. If our work is shameful, then let those who buy it share in the shame. If it is human, then let us be treated as humans. When the petition was read aloud in the Guildhall, the room fell silent. Some scoffed. Some were moved. Some were terrified. For the first time in the city's history, courtesans were no longer silent shadows. They were political actors. A love that was never paid for. During this turbulent time, Adele spent more nights with the courtesans, not as a scholar, not as a witness, but as a friend. She sat with Marceline by candlelight as the older woman coughed from stress and exhaustion. She helped Yasand apply salve to the bruise she still carried from the riot. She listened to the girl's fears and dreams. And she formed a bond with one woman in particular, Lunette, a quiet, soft-spoken courtesan who rarely told clients anything personal. With Adele, however, she spoke freely. "You see us differently," Lunette said one evening as they shared warm cider near an open hearth. "I see you as people," Adele replied. "Most do not. To them, we are fantasies or sins, nothing in between." Lunette reached for Adele's hand, hesitated, then slowly intertwined their fingers. "This," she whispered, "is the only love I give freely, and the only love I don't want to lose." Adele felt her breath catch. For the first time, she understood. Amid a world built on love for money, she had found a love untouched by coin. And that kind of love carried its own price. The cost of telling the truth. The petition gained traction. Supporters emerged. Poets, merchants, widows, young men who had learned not to fear desire. But so did enemies. Some councilmen accused Adele of corrupting the city with her writings. Church loyalists burned her pamphlets outside the cathedral. One night, Adele returned to her room to find it ransacked. Her manuscripts were slashed, her clothes torn. A note lay on her pillow. "Leave the city, or we will silence you and the women you protect." Adele's hands trembled as she read it. But when she showed the note to Lunette, the courtesan kissed her forehead gently and said, "Then we will stand together. We have survived worse than threats." Adele realized then. Freedom always has a price. And she was finally willing to pay it. Act Vi. The Legacy of the Veiled. Where love for money shapes history, and the women behind the shadows step into the light. Spring bled into summer, and the city that once hunted its courtesans now stood at a crossroads. The riots had faded, the bishop had fallen, the council was divided, and rumors traveled faster than merchant caravans. Women of the Veil were demanding rights. No one in living memory had heard of such a thing. Adele walked the streets each morning, observing the shift, small, subtle, but undeniable. The red lanterns that once hung timidly behind shuttered windows now glowed again, defiant but dignified. People no longer crossed themselves when passing Marceline's house. Some even bowed politely. But progress was a fragile, uncertain thing, and every step forward carried a shadow. The Day of Reckoning. The council announced a final assembly, one that would decide the fate of the petition submitted by Adele and the courtesans. The entire city buzzed with anticipation. Some feared moral collapse. Others hoped for justice. Outside the guild hall, a crowd gathered. Merchants, bakers, sailors, mothers with children, noble women with veils pulled low. And woven among them were the courtesans themselves, their dresses modest, but their eyes blazing with determination. Adele stood beside Lunette, their hands discreetly linked beneath Lunette's cloak. Marceline, draped in deep plum silk, carried herself like a matriarch of an ancient order. Yasande, fierce as ever, had tied her hair back with a strip of crimson cloth, a symbol that she would not bow again. Inside, the councilmen took their places. Papers shuffled, quills scraped, murmurs rippled. Adele felt her heartbeat echo in her throat. Then the clerk read aloud the petition's title. The Petition of the Veiled, Rights and Protections for Women Who Trade in Love for Money. The hall erupted in whispers. The phrase alone, love for money, was enough to scorch the ears of the devout. Yet it was the truth, and for once, truth stood unveiled. Voices of the unheard. The council allowed only 3 representatives to speak for the petition. They chose Marceline for her wisdom, Yasande for her bravery, Adele for her scholarship and witness. Marceline spoke first, her voice steady. We do not ask for praise, we ask for safety. If men seek our company freely, if they pay us freely, then acknowledge us freely. Yasande spoke second, eyes burning. You punished us for sins you commit in silence. If you condemn us, condemn your brothers, your sons, your friends who pay to share our beds. If you will not, then grant us the dignity you deny yourselves. And finally, Adele spoke, her words drifting through the hall like smoke. Every city in history has tried to erase women like these. Yet they remain, because desire remains, because hypocrisy remains, because humanity remains. You cannot kill a truth simply because it embarrasses you. When she finished, the hall was silent. A long, trembling silence. The vote that shaped a future. The council withdrew behind carved wooden doors. Hours passed. The crowd outside grew restless. The sun fell, bathing the square in orange light. Courtesans leaned against pillars, praying or pacing. Adele and Lunette sat on the stone steps, shoulders touching, but not speaking. At last, The doors opened. The senior councilman stepped forward. His expression gave nothing away. "The council," he announced, his voice booming across the square, "recognizes the rights of the women known as the Veiled to seek protection under law, and acknowledges their trade as a legal profession within the city." Gasps, cries, laughter, disbelief. And then cheers, rising like a wave. Not universal cheers. Some citizens screamed in outrage, tearing at their hair, shouting invectives about sin and hellfire. But it didn't matter. History had been rewritten. Courtesans were no longer shadows. They were citizens. The Night of Lanterns. That night, every red lantern in the stone quarter was relit, not as a sign of secrecy, but as a symbol of victory. Hundreds lined the streets, glowing like constellations. Adele walked with the women she had come to love, her steps light, her heart full. Music spilled from doorways, wine flowed freely, strangers clasped hands. The city felt alive in a way she had never seen. Marceline stood in the doorway of her restored house, watching the celebration with eyes that shimmered. "I never thought I would live to see this," she whispered. "You built this," Adele said. "No," Marceline corrected gently. "We built this." A love that cannot be bought. Later, away from the revelry, Adele and Lunette climbed to the roof of Marceline's house. The city stretched out beneath them, dotted with lanterns like embers across a map. Lunette rested her head on Adele's shoulder. "Do you ever regret staying with us?" she asked softly. "Never." "Even knowing how dangerous it became?" Adele took Lunette's face in her hands. "I faced danger for the truth, but I stayed for you." Lunette kissed her, slowly, deliberately, with a tenderness that had nothing to do with coin. In a world built upon love for money, this was the rarest love of all, the kind that was given freely. The chronicle lives on. Weeks later, Adele finished her manuscript. She titled it, "The Chronicle of the Veiled, a History of Women, Power, and the Price of Desire." It told the truth of the courtesans, not the myths, not the moral tales, but the realities of their courage, their pain, their survival. Her work spread across the region. Scholars cited it, merchants debated it, church officials denounced it. Young women whispered its words in secret, feeling courage kindle in their hearts. But the women who mattered most, the courtesans themselves, read it with tears. Marceline called it our mirror. Yasande called it our weapon. Lunette called it our freedom. Epilogue: The veil lifts. Years later, Adele and Lunette would leave the city to start anew, taking the chronicle with them. The stone quarter changed, laws evolved, and generations later, people would look back and marvel at how a group of marginalized women reshaped the fate of an entire city. History would remember them not as sinners, nor temptresses, nor shadows in dimly lit windows, but as women who fought to exist in a world determined to silence them. women who demanded justice. Women who dared to love. Women who survived by turning love for money into power. And at the center of their story stood Adele's final line, carved into the chronicle's last page. The veil was never meant to hide them. It was meant to blind the world. Now the veil is lifted.